the fan off. It is hot in my room right now. And we are going to be reacting to the mystery color bomb bank robbery where a pizza delivery guy got literally kidnapped by some people and forced from a bank, and then the bomb exploded into his chest. Because he was wearing the bomb and it went like a CPR machine from hell. So let's watch it while I work on making products for a holiday bazaar I'm going to be selling that.
This week on Buzzfeed Unsolved, we discussed the bizarre collar bomb incident. Though some of the culprits in this one have seemingly been identified, the details in this one remain murky.
We sort of toil in murk, don't we?
I would say so. But like I said, we do know some of the main players, or at least we think we do. But then we don't, but then we do. I guess you have to stick around to find out.
Okay, I'm in.
On August 28th, 2003, a phone call is made during lunchtime rush to Mamma Mia's Pizza, located at 5154 Peach Street. Tony Ditmo, the owner of Mamma Mia's, takes an order for 2 large sausage and pepperoni pizzas. Tony cannot understand the customer telling him the address, so he hands the phone over to his employee, Brian Wells. Wells is about 5 feet 3 inches, age 46, and balding on top. Wells takes down the address, 8631 Peach Street, and heads out south on Peach Street for what seems to be an ordinary delivery. And yet, roughly 2 hours later, Brian Wells is on live TV for robbing a bank. He is handcuffed and surrounded by state troopers in the parking lot of Eyeglass World with a bomb strapped to his neck. Wells tells the police that the bomb was fastened to him by a group of black men who ordered him to rob a bank. After about 30 minutes of gently trying to communicate his plight, Wells says to the police, quote, "Why is it nobody's trying to come get this thing off me? I don't have a lot of time. It's gonna go off. I'm not lying. Did you call my boss?" End quote. At about 3:18 p.m., the caller starts emitting a loud and rapid beeping noise, and then the bomb detonates, and Wells falls backwards, slowly dying, while medics and police are baffled in the background. Wells dies on the pavement. 2 minutes later, the bomb squad finally arrives.
This is why I take issue anytime anyone, some trivial thing goes wrong in their day and they say,
That's true.
FML, bro. Look what happened to this man in 2 hours.
Yeah.
He woke up that day just going to sling some za.
Yeah. He was a Zoss slinger.
Yeah.
And he got a little bit more than he thought he was going to get out of it.
One false move, suddenly his life is in tatters. That's horrible. We take so much for granted.
We do take so much for granted. You're right.
Let's appreciate each day. You never know when things are going to go south.
Like getting a bomb strapped to your neck.
Right?
Collar bombs have only been known to be used by Colombian drug lords in turf wars, making the use of one in Erie, Pennsylvania, especially strange. Even more odd, police found several pages of instructions telling Wells how to rob the bank and remove his explosive collar. The notes were addressed to the, quote, bomb hostage, end quote. The instructions were handwritten with illustrations. It appeared that Wells was telling the truth. He was sent on a hunt, and his reward was his life. This case seemed pretty cut and dry, but as more details arose, it appeared that Wells may not have entirely been a victim. Like I said, things aren't exactly what they seem in this case. Obviously, this man appears to be a victim, but
appearances can be deceiving.
Profound stuff. All right, let's move on.
I mean, this might be a controversial or unpopular opinion, but I kind of think that the dude was sort of a victim because he got like the bomb exploded into his chest, which I don't think was part of the plan. So therefore, he was like a victim in it.
To elucidate this possibility further, let's look into Wells.
And also, he was like a victim of like lazy policing.
His landlady and neighbor, Linda Payne, states that Wells was an ordinary Erie, Pennsylvania resident. Linda said, quote, he liked to help people. He used to get up, get his breakfast at McDonald's or somewhere, and a newspaper, come home and hang out until it was time to go to work. He was very shy. He took the hubcaps off of his car because they were too shiny. He was a perfect tenant, end quote. At the age of 46, Wells lived alone with 3 cats. He was a dedicated employee at Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. In the 10 years of his employment there, he had only called in late for work once, due to the death of one of his cats. Admittedly, none of this seems to scream high-profile bank thief. Let's jump into the timeline. The phone call to the pizzeria was made around 1:47 p.m. Wells agreed to take the delivery, even though it was the end of his shift. Wells would have arrived at 8631 Peach Street at about 2 p.m. During investigation, it was found that the delivery location was not a home, but a TV transmission tower site in a wooded area off of Peach Street. It was only reachable by a dirt road. The area was swept, and they found footprints that matched Wells' footwear and the tire tracks of his Geo Metro. The area offered no clues as to how he had been lured there or what exactly happened when he arrived, but one thing is clear. It's during this time that Wells was outfitted with the collar bomb, because 20 minutes later, at roughly 2:20 p.m., Wells walked into the PNC Bank wearing the collar bomb. The bank was about 2 miles back up Peach Street, and Wells was wearing a t-shirt with the word "Guess" across the chest, a shirt he was not wearing before, and a shirt that relatives say was not his.
Yeah,
Like
obviously.
the brand?
No, the word, it was written on the shirt, guess.
Oh, strange. My family, they don't know what shirts I have. I've got some I barely ever wear.
Yeah, that's true. I got shirts in there I haven't
we all
worn
have
for
shirts we
years.
haven't
Maybe we
worn
could do a
in
little spring
years.
cleaning together.
Yeah.
No, that's
I mean,
what
we
need
live
to-
in
well,
separate
we could, Yeah, we
locations.
could do it like concurrently though.
FaceTime.
Yeah, it's true. We could do that. This weekend?
Sure. Fun little Saturday.
Wells was instructed to, quote, go to the bank quietly, enter with the weapon you were given, avoid panicking the tellers or customers, use the weapon if anyone does not cooperate or attempts to leave the bank, end quote. John Seckel, a witness at the bank robbery, saw Wells walk into the bank with a shotgun disguised as a cane and what appeared to be a shoebox under his
No,
shirt.
it was the bomb.
The bomb was already around Wells' neck at this point.
How do they expect this man not to scare anyone?
It was a cane. It looks like a cane.
I don't care how hard you try to disguise a shotgun as a cane.
He was kind of in an unwinnable situation because he
Right.
has this bomb
Yeah.
and he has a shirt that has the word guess across it. So already he's drawing some weird looks.
Wells gave a bank teller a white envelope and spoke in a low voice. Wells's note to the bank teller said, quote, gather employees with access codes to vault and work fast to fill bag with $250,000. You have only 15 minutes, end quote. He then lifted his shirt and showed the teller his bomb, which the note confirmed. At one point, the teller yelled, Audrey, the code for a robbery.
Hey, that's a pretty good code word.
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
Yeah, it is. Because also you don't want that code
think
word to
so.
spook everyone. So if you're sitting in a bank, waiting in line, and you see one of the tellers go, "Oh, Audrey," you go, "Oh, they're just calling
I'm
for
pretty
Audrey."
sure that if I was
But if the banker goes, "Peacock's nest,"
One teller whispered to a customer to leave, and a group of people began to exit. The teller told Wells that there was no way to enter the vault at that time, and was only able to hand over $8,702. Seckel said about Wells, quote, we walked right past him. He didn't bat an eye, end quote. Seckel said that Wells didn't appear scared or cocky. He was actually calm. Wells left a sealed note for the police along with his driver's license with the teller as he was told to do. A woman with a cell phone called 911, and about 3 minutes later, Wells walked out of the bank sucking on a dum-dum he took from the bank counter.
pretty fucking baller.
and took off in his car.
Who
You had
knows
to
what
be
state of mind
calm.
he's in if he's like, "Oh, this is it.
I
Only
think-
got 8K.
I think it's fair to
Going
say
out with a dum-dum in my gullet, baby."
I'm gonna imagine it would be pretty hard for me to remain calm during this situation.
I'd at least be sweating.
Yeah, but to be just cool as a cucumber.
It's pretty impressive.
Impressive or suspicious is probably the better word.
Police would later find pages of instructions in Wells's car. The first note read, quote, exit the bank with the money and go to the McDonald's restaurant. Get out of the car and go to the small sign reading drive-thru/open 24 hours in the flower bed. By the sign, there is a rock with a note taped to the bottom. It has your next instructions, end quote.
If you want someone to go to an inconspicuous location, don't go to a McDonald's flower bed.
That's true.
You loiter around a drive-thru, people start yelling at you.
Also, I
Not
mean,
that I've done that, but
it's also like very obvious to have a grown man rummaging through a flower
a
bed.
giant collar,
giant collar.
digging through the flower bed at a
He
McDonald's.
was asking for witnesses. Then again, he's only incriminating himself.
Yeah, I guess.
At the McDonald's, Wells collected a 2-page note that directed him to go up Peach Street to a wooded area several miles away. Shortly after,
man.
Wells was stopped by state troopers and handcuffed while he told them about the bomb. The troopers left him sitting on the ground shouting for
Fucking
help. They called the
shit.
bomb squad as soon as they visually confirmed the device around his neck, and the rest is history.
Why was the
The
bomb
notes directing
squad
Wells said,
taking
quote,
forever?
this powerful booby-trapped bomb can be removed only by following our instructions. Act now, think later, or you will die, end quote. Wells was warned that he would be watched by sentries, and that, quote, if anyone follows or interferes, we may leave and allow timer to detonate or call cell phone detonator, end quote. If Wells did as he was instructed, which included driving around the city to gather passwords, clues, and keys that would disarm the bomb, Wells would end up with a combination to free himself from the bomb. However, it seemed based off of the instructions that Brian Wells never stood a chance. The plot assumed that he would be able to rob a bank of $250,000 and drive around in a Geo Metro with a collar bomb without interference from the police.
So he was kind of doomed from the start here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it seems like the deck is kind of stacked against him.
What I think they wanted to do was they wanted him to go to the next point, make the handoff with the money, continue the scavenger hunt, and then they get rid of a loose end because the bomb goes off.
What's wrong with these people?
They're criminals, man.
Cops tried completing the hunt themselves hours after Wells had died, bouncing from clue to clue until eventually one of the clue locations came up empty. It seemed that whoever was executing this plan had called it off once the police interfered.
Yeah, they did.
One thing to note is that the instructions contained words like we and us, making it appear that there were multiple conspirators. So now, let's get into the suspects.
Any one of these suspects could be part of the gang that carried out this crime.
I see, yes.
So one, maybe two, maybe more than that, may be responsible. But I will say at the end of this, at least one of these people was responsible.
Yep.
Oh boy.
So for once, we will have some bit of closure.
Stick around. You got it, a good hook.
The first suspect is William A. Rothstein. Rothstein was a 6'6" hoarder who only wore dungarees and chest pouches filled with pens and notebooks. He spoke multiple languages, was an engineer, and a high school shop or introductory mechanics teacher. Less than a month after the collar bomb incident, Rothstein called the police and told the dispatcher, quote, at 8645 Peach Street in the garage, there is a frozen body. It's in
That
the
is
freezer,
100%
end
sus.
quote. The address was
Why the
Rothstein's
fuck
home,
does he have
and
a
he claimed the
corpse
body
in a
was
freezer?
there because he was storing it as a, quote, favor for
Why?
a friend, end quote.
That's
Big favor.
dumb.
Big
That's
favor.
a big
Only
ass.
store body
Yeah, I don't think I
if
could
you're a
call any of my
hoarder.
friends and be like, hey man,
Remember that time they helped you move that couch?
yeah.
Gonna call one in.
This is kind of like that, except instead of a couch, it's a dead person.
Yeah.
The friend in question was a woman named Marjorie Deal Armstrong. The body was 45-year-old James Roden, who was killed by his then-girlfriend Marjorie by
was
shotgun
murdered.
blast while he was sleeping in her bedroom. This occurred on August 13th, about 6 weeks before Roden's body was reported. Rothstein had twice been engaged to Deal Armstrong, so given their history, he agreed to get rid of Marjorie's shotgun and store the body, but stated that he called the police once Marjorie suggested that Rothstein put the rest of Roden's body in an ice grinder.
Too much.
Bitch.
Yep.
That was, she stepped over the line, man. Either way, I love that this guy has this odd moral compass where it comes to like hiding the body's fine. The next step is chopping the body up. You can't do that.
I imagine her talking to him on the phone and just suggesting, like, while we're on the horn here, do you mind taking that body and putting it through the ice grinder? Then just a beat of silence, and he just kind of sighs.
And she knows she's gone
And
too
she's
far.
like, shit, that was what was I thinking?
Yeah, one too many.
The jig is
Damn
up.
it, Marjorie.
He was placed in custody hours later. He agreed to testify against Marjorie for immunity. He told the police that he had been feeling incredibly guilty and at one point was considering suicide. Police found a suicide note in a desk at his home. Interestingly, the note started with, quote, "This has nothing to do with the Wells case,"
What?
end quote,
That
which
is
truly
again
is an odd
sus.
thing to say, because from an outside perspective, it has no apparent relation.
My friend went to New Orleans recently, and she was like, oh, I'd love to buy a house here.
Yeah.
And one of the signs said for sale, and under that sign was a big red sign that said, not haunted.
Oh, that house is, I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe that house is haunted.
That's as weird to me as saying, this has nothing to do with this case that has nothing to do with this. Don't look into it at all.
The only link between Rothstein and Brian Wells seemed to be a coincidence. Rothstein's house was one of the only houses in the vicinity of Brian Wells' last pizza delivery in the woods. Rothstein's house was a mere 5-minute walk away. Additionally, the phone call that placed the order of pizzas was traced to a payphone on 8228 Peach Street at a Shell garage, only a half-mile away from Rothstein's home. Lorraine Blodgett, the manager of the convenience store at the Shell garage, stated Rothstein would often come in. Quote, he'd come in to buy newspapers and cookies. He'd sit outside in his car and have brunch, read the paper, end quote. Rothstein also used to make calls from the payphone. When you combine these circumstantial details with the fact that Rothstein brought up the Wells case unprovoked, it is undoubtedly suspicious and brings to the forefront Rothstein's mechanical prowess. Police searched his home and found power tools, welders, and quote, piles of old machinery, end quote. One NPR article states that Rothstein, quote, had the mechanical know-how to build the ingenious bomb that killed Wells, end quote. The collar was made up of, quote, a triple-banded metal collar with 4 keyholes and a 3-digit combination lock, and an iron box containing 2 6-inch pipe bombs loaded with double-base smokeless powder. The hinge collar locked around Wells's neck like a giant handcuff, end quote. Investigators were able to tell that the device had been made using professional tools. In 2007, a Pennsylvania grand jury agreed that Rothstein had dumped over 1,000 pounds of evidence at a local landfill.
Damn.
But even if Rothstein did make the bomb, he didn't quite fit the profile of the mastermind of such a cruel operation. And thus, we discuss Marjorie Deal Armstrong, our
This
second
bitch.
suspect. After Rothstein tipped off the police to the murder of James Roden, police entered Marjorie's home, which was a mess of dog feces,
Ew.
clothes, and fast food cartons. The police had to wear toxic hazard suits.
I hate all of this story, Ryan. The filth here is making my skin crawl.
This is
I
the woman
know.
who had him store a body for her murdered boyfriend.
She must have been real pretty.
Or devious.
I mean, why are you 2 times proposing to a woman whose house is full of dog shit?
Maybe she just had a hook on him, you know? You just can't let go.
Every time he'd go out for a walk and smell a little dog shit, he'd be like, ah, Marjorie.
Marjorie. The aroma.
The aroma of Marjorie.
Marjorie already had a reputation in Erie and had killed before. She admitted to having shot her boyfriend,
What?
Robert Thomas,
Oh
in
my
1984, but she was acquitted because she stated that she was a victim of domestic abuse. Her first husband hung himself, and her second died after hitting his head at home on a coffee table.
I mean,
got
she's
4
obviously an
bodies under her
evil
belt.
person, but just to live a life that's so fraught with chaos sounds stressful.
But also, this person needs to be eradicated from the rest of normal society.
We should separate her.
Yeah, for sure. We should put her over there.
Find a spot for her where she can no longer get married to people.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
it's obviously a fatal thing.
According to her former high school classmates, she was known for her intelligence, but over the years, it mingled with madness. She suffered from multiple mental illnesses, including bipolar disorder, paranoia, and narcissism. Her moods would swing, and she seemed unable to stop her rapid-fire speech. The local DA, Brad Falk, who had also attended school with Marjorie, described Marjorie as, quote, one of those folks that thinks she's smarter and slicker and brighter than everybody else, and that at the end of the day, she believes she'll win, or she'll prevail on anything that she does. It's the way she's been for 40 years,
Those
end
people
quote.
suck ass.
She seemed like the type that would make a bank heist more complicated than it needed to be, and she also seemed to be
Yeah,
the
she
type
did.
that would need to brag about her genius plan. The FBI made a profile of the collar bomber based on behavioral analysis. The collar bomber was profiled as a hoarder, comfortable with
Check.
shop machines and power tools. The
Check.
collar bomber also had access to work with these tools
Check.
alone and took pride in their creations with dual purposes, a collar and a bomb and a cane and a shotgun. They had a violent past and a superiority complex. This profile fit the combination of Rothstein and Deal Armstrong. She had a complex, a violent past, and he had shop skills. Though we aren't done with Deal Armstrong, I'll now introduce our third suspect, a man named Kenneth Barnes. A witness came forward in 2005 that said Kenneth Barnes was involved. He was a former TV repairman turned crack dealer. Earlier in 2007, 27-year-old sex worker Jessica Hoopsick came forward saying she knew Brian Wells and had, quote, turned tricks, end quote, with him at the home of Kenneth Barnes. Hoopsick had left a message on Brian's answering machine and was a link between Brian and Deal Armstrong. It turned out that Kenneth E. Barnes, who would supply Hoopsick with drugs, used to go fishing with Marjorie Deal Armstrong.
Hence, connecting Barnes, Brian, and now Armstrong. So, he knew these people.
What a town.
Barnes had spoken too freely about the collar bomb plan, and his brother-in-law turned him in while Barnes was already in jail for unrelated drug charges. Barnes and Deal Armstrong had also been seen driving the wrong way on the highway near one of the locations of the search. Barnes said he would exchange information for a reduced sentence. Barnes also confirmed the FBI's belief that Dale Armstrong was the mastermind. He stated that Dale Armstrong needed the money because she wanted to pay Barnes to kill her father, who she believed was blowing through his fortune, which was money she expected to inherit. Barnes claimed that he was kept in the dark about most of the plan, but he had already corroborated with much of what the FBI had already heard. Other than Barnes, investigators had previously spent weeks with informants who said that Dale Armstrong talked about plans of the bomb in intimate detail. A fellow inmate of Dale Armstrong told authorities that Dale Armstrong had admitted to killing her boyfriend James Roden because he was going to expose the bomb plot. The FBI met with Dale Armstrong while she was serving time for the murder of James Roden. Dale Armstrong promised to tell them everything if they would transfer her from Muncie State Penitentiary to Cambridge Springs, a minimum security prison closer to Erie. Dale Armstrong insisted to the FBI that she had nothing to do with the collar bomb plot, but she did supply the kitchen timers used for the bomb and was within a mile of the bank robbery when it happened. She agreed to drive around Erie with the agents and showed them where she had been that day, linking her to several locations of the crime. Marjorie also admitted to the FBI that on the day Brian died, she had gone to the Shell station with her Jeep and bought $10 of gas. Rothstein and Barnes were also with her. Rothstein had used the payphone before Wells died, implying that Rothstein made the phone call to the pizzeria. She then claimed she would provide no further information without immunity, but she had already given away too much information. The FBI informed Dale Armstrong that they had enough information to indict her.
Frankly, this is stressful, Ryan.
It's very stressful. So she gave him all these details. I was like, I'm not going to tell you anymore unless I get immunity. And they're like, you've told us enough to indict you,
Yeah.
So she effectively put herself behind bars,
Yeah,
which
she
is kind
did.
of funny.
She claimed that Rothstein planned the whole thing, and more importantly, that Wells was in on the heist,
I know she's
which
lying
brings
on
us
that
to our
bit.
fourth and final suspect, Brian Wells.
Now that is surprising. Why would this man be in on it himself?
Well, what I'm about to break down may make you a little upset.
It's been a very upsetting day, Ryan.
Yes, it has been.
Let's hear more.
All right.
When looking at the known details of the timeline, two things come off as suspicious on the part of Wells. First, that Wells's demeanor was so calm during the robbery. And second, that it seems there was no evidence to back up Wells's story that he was attacked by a group of black men who locked him in the collar at gunpoint. Wells's calm throughout the situation troubled the police, who were never quite able to rule him out as a conspirator in his own death. In 2007, District Attorney Mary Beth Buchanan stated that she believes Wells was in on the plot along with Rothstein, Barnes, and Dale Armstrong, who was the mastermind. The DA also believes that Dale Armstrong and Barnes had planned on taking the money from Brian as soon as he had robbed the bank, but fled when they saw the cops and left Brian for dead. Because Wells allegedly never had a chance in his doomed scavenger hunt, DA Buchanan believes that Brian was part of the operation and given a collar bomb for an alibi. The collar would also ensure that Brian would stick to the plan, hand over the money, and if things went downhill, quote, he would not survive to be a witness against the other conspirators, end quote. Kenneth Barnes also claimed that Wells had been talking about the robbery about a month before it happened. According to the FBI affidavit, another witness had corroborated this. In July 2007, DA Buchanan announced the investigation was over, stating that Dale Armstrong and Barnes were charged with carrying out the crime. The indictment also stated that Rothstein and Wells were conspirators. Based on information gathered over 4 years of over 8,000 interviews, Wells was charged with being in on the scheme from the beginning. Kenneth Barnes claims Wells was willing to help with the
How do you
promise
charge
of
someone
money
who's
because he
dead?
was in an expensive relationship with sex worker Jessica Hoopsick. According to the indictment completed in 2007, Wells thought the bomb was fake, and so he agreed to
can
wear
see
it.
that.
He was told it was meant to fool the cops. If he was caught, he could blame the threatening instructions. Barnes claims Wells only realized when he delivered the pizzas to the TV transmission tower that the bomb was real, and he was locked into the device at gunpoint when he tried to run away.
Why didn't he just assume it was fake still?
He was thinking probably of some cartoonish looking bomb. He gets there, it's professionally made. And he realizes, holy shit, this actually may be a real bomb. Maybe he even said something like, hey, that bomb looks pretty real, guys. And they all kind of didn't laugh when he started chuckling. He's like, uh-oh.
I guess you get what you pay for. If you're hanging out with people who all
Yeah.
agree that maybe it's a good idea for you to wear a fake bomb and rob a bank, you can't be outraged when they put a real one on you.
District Attorney Buchanan said that over time, Wells had changed from a co-conspirator to an unwilling participant. Wells was double-crossed. To make things more confusing, a week later, the FBI concluded that the whole plot was a hoax. They believed that the bomb would have gone off if anyone had tried to remove it, and Wells would have died no matter what. Jim Fisher, a retired FBI agent, believes that Wells's death was part of the plan. Quote, "It was a first-degree murder. This was an intentional premeditated homicide. Moreover, it was extremely cruel in the way the crime was executed." End quote. Despite the debate, Wells's family firmly believes that he was a victim. As Buchanan completed her statement of the investigation, one of Wells's sisters continuously yelled, "Liar." The official aftermath unfolded as follows. In February 2011, Marjorie Deal Armstrong was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years for her role in the heist. Deal Armstrong claimed on her first day on the stand that she never knew Brian Wells and had never heard of him until he was on the news. Deal Armstrong claimed that she is not the killer and that they are still out there. Deal Armstrong died on April 4th, 2017 of natural causes in a Texas prison. Kenneth Barnes was sentenced in 2008 for, quote, "conspiracy to commit armed bank robbery, using and carrying a firearm during a crime of violence," end quote. Barnes's 45-year sentence was reduced to 20 because he cooperated with authorities and admitted involvement. He's expected to be released in 2027. William Rothstein died of terminal cancer in the summer of 2004 before facing any charges. For what it's worth, retired FBI agent and criminal justice professor Jim Fisher believes that Rothstein was the true mastermind. Quote, "The son of a bitch ended up winning. He died with all of the secrets. He died taking all the answers with him. He gets the last laugh in that sense. He escaped punishment. He escaped detection," end quote. And finally, Brian Wells, whose supposed involvement is what classifies this case as a cold case for many. Despite the official conclusion that Wells had been a part of the plan, many point out evidence against this idea, such as the fact that he let people at the bank leave during the robbery, and the note he left with the teller easily led the police to him. But some prosecutors say that was intentional. Wells's family and friends say he was, quote, 100% innocent, end quote, and there was no way he could have been involved. Others say Wells started out as a willing participant, but was double-crossed and became a victim. It appears clear that Deal Armstrong, Rothstein, and Barnes were all involved to some extent, but whether or not Brian Wells' involvement goes beyond simply delivering a pizza at the wrong time remains murky. Although the official ruling is that Wells was in fact a participant in at least the heist, there are many who still classify his role in this heist as unsolved.
Yeah. I honestly kind of think that Brian Wells is, like, still a victim, because, like, I don't think he planned on getting a live bomb strapped to him and then getting blown up on live TV. See you guys in the next one.